probably all heard about the pre-trib rapture, the mid-trib rapture, the post-trib rapture, the partial trib rapture, the pre-wrath trib rapture, and there ain't no rapture. Those are all views that have been going around the church for a long time. And, when I first became interested in eschatology in 1981, like Jim said, I was like, Lord, your word's not multiple choice, and you didn't make this a mystery. He doesn't lay everything out on the platter for us, like the Trinity and the rapture and all that. He's created his word so that we have to dig and we have to connect things. And so anyway, I took note of the FBI has a practice when they're learning how to spot counterfeit money. And what they do is they learn like the feel of it, the way it crimples, the weight of it, the color, the ink. They hold it up and there's overlays and there's things embedded, certain watermarks and artwork that goes on. And they learn it so well that they can spot a counterfeit really easy. They don't have to learn all the counterfeits because there's always something new coming out anyway. And so they just learn the real thing so well that they don't have to learn all the counterfeits. So I believed in pre-trib rapture, and I thought, but I don't want to just learn all of the views and everything that gets into, and usually people just argue and give their views, and at the end of the day, no one's changed their mind. And it's the same way with, I noticed there's like TV shows and books written and CD sets and all these things on these different views, and I thought, Lord, what's your view? And so anyway, I don't take any credit because I don't think PhDs and all that is what makes you understand the Word of God, because He's operates in a different way. But the thing is, if you just really seek Him and show Him, it's usually less complicated than what we have made it. And so I'm just going to show you what I've learned about how to tell the differences in. Now, here's what I would have called it. If I were to write a booklet on this, here's what I would call it. If believers knew the purposes of the 70th week, there wouldn't be different rapture views. But that's too long of a title, so I just would call it The Missing Link. And so I was able to make a CD series a few years ago on this, and that's what I call it, was The Missing Link, and that's why you get that first slide. So I also asked God how to fit a gallon of information today into a thimbleful of time. So I'm going to do my best, and so we're going to be moving along at a pretty good clip. The first thing that the Lord showed me was the 4 basic time slots in the Bible. And, it's just real simple. You've got the Old Testament, then you've got the church age, then you've got those 7 years that are in Revelation, and then you've got the millennium. So first he showed me the time slots: Old Testament, church age, 7 years, and the millennium. Or the Jews call it the Messianic Kingdom, and the Bible calls it the 1,000 years. And so that was helpful to me right there, just learning that simple thing. And then he showed me there's 3 people groups in the Bible, and you will find that in 1 Corinthians 10:32. And there's Jews that are unsaved, there's Gentiles that are unsaved, and there's the church, which is full of saved Jews and Gentiles. So that's 3 groups of people. And then plus 1, because the 70th week, which people call the 7-year tribulation, has got that group of people, and they're different from the church age, and I'm going to show you that, and I'm going to show you why the rapture doesn't come during the tribulation. I'm going to show you all this, and it's very interesting to see how God laid this all out. And so there's the Jews, the Gentiles, the church, and the 70th week people, or if you wanted to call them the tribulation people. And in that group, in that 7 years, those living on the earth at that time, they will be saved and unsaved. They will be Jewish and Gentile as well. So there will be a mix, but they will be unique because they won't be in the church age. That's over by then. The next thing, the word tribulation, the Lord showed me, because I said, there's so much confusion and blurriness that goes on. What's the debate all about? And he showed me that the word tribulation should not be used in the same sentence as the word rapture, because tribulation is just what they're going through during that 7 years. It's what they're going through. And by calling it a tribulation rapture, pre, mid, post, and so on, we're linking those two words together like they belong together, and that's what makes everyone confused. And so the difficulty of what these people go through is horrendous, and I'll tell you where they got the idea of tribulation. It's actually what Jesus called it. But we could also call it trial, trouble, calamity, catastrophe, any kind of negative word you can think of. And Jesus used the word tribulation himself in Matthew 24, but and then in another spot he said great tribulation. And so then they named the second half, which is worse than the first half, they named that the great tribulation. You'll see prophecy teachers do that. And so anyway, it's I'm going to show you why we cannot be part of that 7 years. So I was looking at the screen at the back, and I forgot to look at my notes. So they're the same, but let's see here. God ordained a 490 year. Okay, here we go. He ordained, now this is the key, okay? God ordained a 490-year prophecy, and it was given to the Jews because it's in the Old Testament. It's in the book of Daniel. And as you know, the book of Daniel's in the Old Testament, and he was Jewish. When they got conquered by Babylon, they took all these Jews over to Babylon, which is mostly Iraq today, and Iran and Syria, that area. And anyway, there's two main purposes, and it's all about the gathering of the Jewish people and getting back into covenant. There does need to be judgment of their rejection of Christ, and God will settle with them and keep his word to them. And I'll show you a little bit more of that. And the 70 weeks of years, they're determined. This is what the Lord said to Daniel in this prophecy. In Daniel 9, verse 24, it says, 70 weeks of years are determined for your people and of your holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end to sin, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Now, in the Hebrew, it said place, so most holy place. And that's the 6 reasons right there that are pertaining to the Jews, because God is saying to Daniel, 70 weeks. Now, when they say weeks, the Jewish people know that weeks means 7. Like if we say decade, we know that means 10. So a week to them, they know that's years. And he's telling them that 70 weeks, which is 490 years, has been determined for your people. That means the Jews. And for your holy city, which is what? Jerusalem. And then it lists these 6 reasons: to finish the transgression, to make an end to sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. Now, some of those sound a little similar, but they are different. And so I looked up what a born-again rabbi, how he explained these. And so I'm going to go over them with you because I want you to first see what goes on in the 7 years, why it's not anything to do with us, okay? So I'm going to just develop the 7 years a little bit, and then we'll talk about the rapture. So, the first one is to finish the transgression, and this was the transgression in the context of the rejection of the Messiahship of Christ. So they not only did that 2,000 years ago, but they've been doing it for 2,000 years, and God does not take that lightly, and they will have to answer to him for that. However, he's made them promises, and he's going to come through. So even though there's a reconciliation of this transgression, he will give them the promises that he has promised. And then the second thing, make an end to sins. Dr. Fruchtenbaum said that there will be no sin in the immediate region of Israel during the time of the Messianic reign. And I'm going to read a verse to you in a little bit. But the devil's bound during that 1,000 years of the Messianic reign. And so can you imagine living where there's no temptation or the devil instigating people to be angry and deceitful and so on and so forth? So it's like it's near perfect conditions. Even the lions become herbivores. It's just total peace, and Christ is in control. So you can only imagine how wonderful it's going to be. So then the next thing, to make reconciliation for iniquity, this is an atonement. And so the Jews, when they get back in covenant with God, they're going to be sacrificing animals for atonement, because that's what they know to do. And this was in their laws. And then to bring in everlasting righteousness, this means righteous living. And so if you boot the sin factor out of the way, it will be possible for people to actually live righteously. And to seal up vision and prophecy, well, when Jesus is reigning, there won't be a need for visions or prophecies and even dreams, because those gifts were all given to the church because we need them. We need them, and we need God to show himself to mankind that he causes people to do this. And even though a lot of people don't believe prophets, they don't believe dreams, they don't believe visions, that's on them. That doesn't mean that it's not true. It doesn't mean God's not doing that. He gave these visions to people, and so whether people believe it or not, that doesn't make them not true. And so, but there will come a time in that 1,000-year reign where conditions will be so perfect, it won't even be needed. So to seal it up means that it comes to an end. And then to anoint the most holy place, this will be the millennial temple. And for the 1,000-year reign, see Ezekiel 40 through 44 if you're interested in reading about that temple and the land that each tribe will get during that 1,000 years. It's very, very interesting. Now, this won't be the temple that's in the tribulation. That will be a quick one. But this fourth one will be the last one. And that'll be the one where God gives very specific directions. It's never happened in history. It's yet future. And so that's a good read if you're interested in that. So then, in the next slide, so Ezekiel 36, 26 through 28. So this is what God says to Israel, and this is future. I will give you, Israel, a new heart and put a new spirit within you. I will take the heart of stone out of your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes, and you will keep my judgments and do them. Then you shall dwell in the land that I gave to your fathers. You shall be my people, and I will be your God. So he's going to turn them into a righteous people. This is what he wanted all along. But when the devil's bound, it will certainly be easier to do. And so he's going to reestablish the land, and not just the borders they have, but the original ones, which is bigger. And then he will let them be a fruitful and prosperous people again in a righteous way. And they won't have to undergo the persecutions that they've been going through the last 2 years. So, see, God has a twofold plan for the 70th week. Number one, it's about the Jews being held accountable for their sins and rejecting their Messiah. And it's about getting them back into covenant with God. That's the Jewish part of it. The second thing is it's to execute 3 sets of judgment on a Christ and God rejecting world and Gentile rule. So if you look in Revelation 6 through 19, you will see the 3 sets of judgments that God is going to unleash on the world, and it's for their rejection of Christ, it's for the rejection of God, and it's to finally end all Gentile rule forever. So at the end of that 7 years, Armageddon, that'll be the last of any Gentile rule, because as you know, they've popped up all through history, and they're pretty they've been pretty brutal, and they haven't done so well. So in Daniel 9, okay, so the last four verses of Daniel 9, if you can remember that, the last 4 verses, you don't even have to remember the verse, you just do the last 4, you will get the picture of the 70th week. So in verse 24, we just learned about the 6 reasons what he's going to accomplish with the Jews during that time. Now, in verse 25, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem and Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street will be built again, and the wall. Now you will find this in Nehemiah 2:3. Even in troublesome times. So there was quite an ordeal over all that. They had, a sword in one hand and a saw in the other. And, they were trying to get this work done. And so it was quite a deal. And the reason why they went to Babylon in the first place was because 490 years they did not give the land rest. Every 7th year was supposed to be a land Sabbath. That means let it lay idle. And then they were supposed to store up an extra year's worth of everything, but they didn't do it. And they didn't do it, and they didn't do it for 490 years. So 7 divided into that is 70, and that's what they owed him. So he let them be taken captive, and they were over there, and they were slaves for that long. But at the end of that time then, they were released. Cyrus says, let's let the Jewish people go back home, which isn't usually what they do when they have slaves. And then Artaxerxes Longimanus is the one who said, I not only will let you go, but I'll give you some money for building, construction needs and all that kind of thing. So there will be 7 years. 7 weeks. Okay. So this is a little more explanation. And let's see, I already told you about Cyrus and Artaxerxes. Okay, so then it took 49 years. So that first week, when it says 7 weeks, 7 times 7 is 49. So that means that for 49 years they rebuilt the wall and all that, and so that's how long it took them. So that was the first segment. Then it talks about there shall be 62 weeks. So that's 434 years. And the next segment of years, this was the time of the Greek Empire. And it was, have you ever heard of the term intertestament time or between testaments, the silent years? Have you ever heard that? Because between the Old and New Testament, there was that many years. There was 434 years. Well, the silent years only means that God didn't give out any prophecy during that time, okay? But there was a lot going on. They weren't silent. The whole Greek Empire came and went during that time. And then the Roman Empire started up, I think it was 68 BC, and that's when Jesus, he was born into the Roman Empire. So, so that second segment is the part between the two testaments, but it's also the Greek, the Bible was written in Greek, and the Jews learned their language, and they were very influential, the Greeks were. So anyway, that's what the 62 weeks is about. And then, let's see, where is the 70 weeks prophesied in Daniel 9:24? Well, there's a missing 7, right? There's a missing 7. Because first there was 7, then 62, but that only adds up to be 69 weeks a year. So where's the other 7? Well, they haven't happened yet. They haven't happened yet. But we have it spelled out for us, and the whole book of Zechariah is pretty much about the 70th week, and that's what I call it. Instead of calling it the tribulation or the 7-year tribulation, that gets us back to what they're going to go through. So I call it the 70th week because the missing link is linking it back to Daniel 9. So if you listen to a prophecy teacher on the rapture and they don't tell you about Daniel, then they probably haven't found the missing link, because that's the key to understanding which rapture view it should be. If you understand God's purpose for the 70th week, then you'll understand God's purpose for the church and God's purpose for the Jews and God's purpose for the unsaved that will be living during that time. So, so the last 7 years, the lower part, is yet future, and some think just because Revelation is in the New Testament that Revelation pertains to the church, and that's not the case. Okay, now the first 5 chapters is the throne room, and chapters 2 and 3 is the church era, but from 6 to 19 it's about that 70th week, and then 20 and 21, 22 is about, you know, the New Jerusalem coming down and so on and so forth. But anyway, now, if we go to Daniel 26, and after 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, that's Jerusalem. The end of it shall be with a flood, and till the end of the war desolations are determined. Now, the word flood means overwhelming, but many times it's symbolic to mean military action that's overwhelming. So we know that the 70th week ends with the Battle of Armageddon. You've heard of that. And so we know that, okay, so after 62 weeks, you know, that's the part that there was 7, then 62. So when the 69 were over, then that's when Messiah gets cut off. And it's very interesting. They have actually figured out our calendar, compared it to the Jewish lunar calendar, which is 360 days a year, and they've actually figured out that when Jesus rode in on the colt on Palm Sunday to the day, they have figured out, you know, they could predict what day it was going to be, and then when they look at the calendars and they account for leap years and all this stuff, he came in to the day, because that's the day he let the world know, I am the King of the Jews, okay? So it's a big deal to a born-again Jewish person to realize Palm Sunday is more than what we think it is sometimes. Okay, so Daniel 9:26, after the 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off. This is when our Savior was crucified, and then I just said that. However, technically, it's a total of 69 weeks, and I just said that too, because the 7 plus the 62, and it's fulfilled. So there's a total of a 490-year prophecy given, and we only have 483 years now. So where is the 7? And this last 7 years is in the book of Revelation. Now, this is the last verse in Daniel. So it's Daniel 9, the last 4 verses. This will explain. It's in a nutshell. And here's what it says. Then he shall, now that's the Antichrist, then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week, he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abomination shall be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation which is determined is poured out on the desolate. So if we go through this, then he, the Antichrist, shall confirm a covenant, that's a peace treaty, with many, that's Israel, for 1 week, that's 7 years. But in the middle of the week, so 3.5 years into it, he shall bring an end to the sacrifice and offering. So that means the Jews have built a temple, and he's going to go into their temple, and he's going to set up his own image, and I have a feeling it's probably going to be CGI or some kind of artificial intelligence. It's not just going to be a stone statue, but it says it can breathe, it says it can kill, and he's going to demand that the whole world worship him. And just by having that in there, that will defile their temple. They're very touchy about things that go on in their temple, and that would be, so he breaks that covenant, he does that, and that's his move to make the whole world worship him. And then it says, and on the wing of abomination, so that's what they're calling the abomination of desecration, shall be one who makes desolate. So the whole thing, the whole holiness and the whole thing that they're excited about this peace treaty, they're excited they got to build a temple again, and they're excited that they get to worship God again. And so, but he comes in and destroys all that, even until the consummation, that means the final of it, which is determined, is poured out on the desolate. So the Jews will be made desolate, and it says in there that God will allow them to use up all their resources and all their own effort through fighting this, and then they will cry out for help, and that happens to be when Jesus returns, the second coming. So anyway, so the covenant is with the Antichrist, and the Jews will build a 70th week temple. Now, this proof is in many other places, but that they can't even step foot. I'm going to put this in my own words. They can't even step foot on the temple. Years ago, Sharon just went up there to pray, and oh my gosh, a whole battle broke out. They can't go near that Temple Mount. And so for them to have the permission to build a temple, there's going to have something that changed. So that's one thing that would make them, they have to give something for this, but in return, they get to build, that temple on the mount. And that's the very place then that the Antichrist, he's probably thinking ahead of time, I'll let them get all the work done, and then I'll just make that my headquarters. Because he does go in there, and his headquarters is Jerusalem. It says that in another book. But anyway, Isaiah calls it, Isaiah 28:15 calls it a covenant of death. And they will have an overflowing scourge pass through on them. So they're talking about the 70th week. So what they have to go through is going to be terrible. But they get deceived during the middle of that 7 years. And okay, so just points of confusion that blur things for people who think that the rapture is pre, mid, or post in that 7 years. One of them is that the words saints and elect are in the Old Testament, the church age, and the 70th week. So those words, I've read them with my own eyes, so we know that saints and elect, well, that's us. That's us. So I think you pretty much know if you're reading Old Testament stuff, but the church age scripture and the 70th week scripture is what really gets mixed up. So people will read about saints and elect, and they think, oh, see, it's the church age. But no, it's that time segment of the 70th week. So you have to determine what time slot are you reading about. And that'll tell you which people group it is. And then you won't get this so mixed up. So the 5 W's is a good thing to be using, the who, what, when, where, why. And so let's see, believers are called, oh yeah, I told you that. Get the context right and apply the 5 W's. Okay, so now to the rapture. But I hope that you see that God has a twofold purpose, and then he lists the 6 purposes for the Jews. But it also, I could have told you probably 20 verses on his wrath, the wrath that he's going to pour out during the 7 years. It's chilling. So that's when he's going to be judging the world. And do you think that he would judge us for that? Do we have sin that hasn't been accounted for or reconciled with the Lord? See, it's the blood of Jesus that does it. We can't really live up to being what we are in Christ on our own. It's the blood of Christ that does it for us. So I just want to tell you this real quick, that 20 years after Christ was crucified, Paul went to Arabia, and he went into the Arabian desert. And Galatians 1 will tell you this. And for 3 years he got revelation from God. He came back and he taught on these things: the catching up of the church, the revealing of the Antichrist, the supernatural changing of our bodies, and the second coming of Christ. Then 4 years after writing that, and that's told about in 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, Paul wrote and taught 1 Corinthians with more details about the catching up mystery of the church. You can imagine what they thought of this, hearing it for the first time. So what I wanted to say is that some people, if you were to go out and research rapture views, they would say that there was a man in the late 1800s, there's a man whose last name was Darby. Darren, you'll remember that. And then there was a woman with her name was MacDonald, and they had a group of friends, and they realized, hey, the rapture teachings have died, and so let's get this going again. Let's, because the Bible talks about it in 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. It talks about it in 1 Corinthians. Let's get this going again. And so they did. And Paul originally taught it, and it was taught for years and years and years. And so what will happen is that people come in and they see that, and then they say, oh, well, they're the ones that started it up. So they discredit the rapture teachings because of that. And those people did not start it. They just, got it going again. So now here's another objection you might run across. Some might say the word rapture is not in the Bible. And so neither is the word Trinity or church age or millennium or many words that we use and we know are existent. So that is not an argument. But I am going to tell you where it comes from. So the word, hang on here, sorry. So the word was in the Latin Vulgate Bible. Now, Latin was an active language for long time. I remember I was in junior high when it died. They said it's a dead language now. Well, I didn't understand all that, but so for centuries they spoke Latin, and in that Bible it's called rapturo. And then in the Greek Bible, Jim's grandma used to carry around this little well-used Greek Bible, and hers says harpazo, because I looked up in the Greek interlinear, and there it is, harpazo. It's pronounced harpazo. There's a silent D there, but it's spelled like harpazo. And then in the English Bible, ours is called caught up, and some translations say snatched away. And then that didn't catch on real good. So to translate rapturo, the word is rapture. So rapture comes from the Latin rapturo. So that's how all that got started. So because otherwise they'd have to say mid caught up, post caught up, pre-wrath caught up. It wouldn't work too good. Anyway, so that's where those words come from and where we get the word rapture. So then, now we get into Thessalonians, and these are really key for the rapture. The first Thessalonians 4, it says, "For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet of God. And the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we who are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And thus we shall always be with the Lord." So that's a very key verse on the caught up. And then in Acts 15:14, God has a two-part plan. Simon has declared how God at the first visited the Gentiles to take out of them a people for his name. So what is take out when you're not talking about fast food? So take out. Now, English is like a bud. I think of it as a bud. And Hebrew and Greek is like a bouquet. because those words have so many meanings and so much depth, and every believer should know at least one of those languages. I wish I had known that, how valuable they are to get the right picture. So it says, like the rest of that, it says, he visited the Gentiles to take out of them a people for his name. And see, that's when the church started. And then it goes on to say, and then he will again turn to the Jews. So after this era, he was going to again turn to the Jews and finish business with them. He has not forgotten about them. And so in the Greek, the word take out is actually lambano. And this word reveals the intention, okay? So the intention of the one who takes something for the purpose of carrying it away from a certain place and time, to take unto oneself, to take up. Now see how all of that for take out. That's what it means in the Greek. Jesus is going to lambano his bride. Now this is very, very special. So when he takes us up in the rapture, when we get caught away to him, what he's doing is taking us away for a purpose. He's carrying us away from a certain place, that's the earth, and time, that's the church age, to take unto oneself and to take up. So that's what lambano means, and that's what it means when it says, God at the first visited the Gentiles to take out of them a people for his name. Okay, so he did it with great purpose and love. And then remember in John 14:3 when he said, and I go to prepare a place for you, and I will come again and receive you to myself. So when he went, he was promising us that he would come back, receive us unto himself, and then it says, and where I go, you will be with me forever. So he knew when he said that the rapture was coming up. And that should be enough to make you shout, because it's really a plan. He's got such a great plan. And also, if you think about it, Jesus is called the bridegroom, and we're the bride. And so it's like he loves us so much. We hear that the whole time. And why would he want us to go through the tribulation? Why would what purpose would that serve to make your body of believers that have been atoned for by your blood, they've had faith in the blood that you shed, why would you make them turn around and go through judgments that the unsaved are going through? It doesn't make sense. And so just thinking about the way things are, and I'm going to point out to you something about a post-trib view that I wasn't going to go over those views, but there's one thing I will in just a minute here. So now I'm going to show you a sequence of events that never got to be given as proof for the timing of a church age rapture. Because if the rapture is going to be called anything, it should be called the church age rapture, because it fits in the church age. It does not fit in the 7 years. So here's what happened that made it not be used the way it was supposed to be. Okay, here's the verse in 2 Thessalonians that you have heard of. And it says, I'm just doing just the verses, I'm not doing the larger passage. Not to be soon shaken in mind or troubled, either by spirit, or by word, or by letter, as if from us, as though the day of Christ had come. So the people that Paul was teaching had gotten letters, some had gotten just words and rumors that the day of the Lord had already come and gone, and they were left behind. They missed it. So they were scared and worried, and he had to come back to them and say, no, that's not true. It is not from us, as though the day of the Lord had come. See? And he says, let no one deceive you by any means, for the day of the Lord will not come unless there's a falling away comes first, and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition. Okay, so falling away means in Greek apostasia, and departing first is apo, and that means it's a different definition of the same word, okay? Because apostasia has 4 different definitions. Now, you can see what happened. So if you look in Strong's Concordance, those are the numbers they give for apostasia, and it means defection from the truth, falling away, and forsake. And that's exactly what we've all thought when we read this verse. But if you go on to read, there's other definitions. One means revolt, one means divorce, and then there's 575, and that is apo, and it means away from something near in various senses of place, time, and relation. Usually denotes departure from, cessation, and completion. So I've underlined departure there because it's a key word. And the predominant meaning for apostasia in the New Testament is an act of a person departing from another person or place. I got this from a Bible scholar who's went and evaluated all of that. And then in the Lindale and Scott Greek lexicon, apostasia, the first definition is defection, revolt, and the second one is departure. I want you to remember the word departure, and disappearance. So there you go. And 11 out of the 15 times that it's translated as the act of departing of some kind. So in the New Testament, apostasia is used 15 times. 11 out of 15, it's a type of departing, okay? And then Wust, who's a Greek scholar, he also said that if you look at the root verb, apostasia is found 15 times, and the Apple definition, departing, is from a place, time, and relation. So I'm not just saying that because I've looked it up, but there's a lot of Greek scholars who say that the way it's used in the New Testament, it's 11 out of 15 times it's departure of some kind, okay? So now, below is the list of translators, even how they spelled it. And notice they put a Y where we put an I, and they'll put an E on the end of words that don't need it. So this was the first Bible. It was in 1384, the Wycliffe Bible. Instead of saying falling away, it said departing first. Unless there's a departing first, the son of perdition will not be revealed. Okay? Then in 1526, the Tyndale Bible, it said departing first, not falling away. In 1535, the Coverdale Bible, it said departing first. In 1539, the Cranmer Bible, departing first. 1576, Breach's Bible, departing first. 1583, Bez Bible, departing first. 1608, Geneva Bible. And then in 1611, King James Bible says falling away. So, and I guess the reason for that was that King James was looking to modify the English language because it was kind of all over the place. It was complicated, and they did some work on that. So somewhere along the line, somebody decided that they were going to take away the definition called falling away, which is one of them, or they took away departing first and they put in falling away. So, look on the side of your handout. Oh, if you didn't get a handout, Mike can hand them out to you. I was going to ask that in the beginning. Does someone need a handout? You guys need one? Yeah, Mike, can you give one over here? And I want everyone to see this. Does anyone else need one? Back there. The ladies on your left. Yeah. Thank you. Because I want you to see this with your own eyes. I tried to take a a picture and get it on a slide, and it was real blurry, so I had to just photocopy it. This is an actual, you can go on the Bible or on the internet and you can look at these old ancient Bibles and you can look up verses, how they were actually written. Do you see how they spell words there? It's weird, huh? And this is how, when the Tyndale Bible was written, and you see I underlined the part, except there be a departing first. Even how they did their sentence structure was a little weird. So I'm glad they straightened that out, because the way we do it now is much easier to follow. Anyway, I just picked that translation. I could have picked any of them, but I wanted you to see with your own eyes that that's what it said in the Tyndale Bible, okay? And in fact, it's what it said in all of these Bibles. And so for 227 years, after 227 years, someone decided to use the other definition. And so it changes the whole meaning of that verse. So then, next is, how would you read departing in the verse? This is the actual sequence of events. The church departs, and then the Antichrist is revealed to the world, okay? When he signs a treaty with Israel, then that's when that 70th week starts, or the 7 years of judgment. When the Antichrist signs that treaty with Israel, that's what triggers it, not the rapture. The rapture belongs to the church age. That treaty belongs to the 7 years, okay? So now look how it would read if it wasn't changed. Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the departing comes first and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition. So see the order? And that would have changed how people think about it, but you can't use that as an arguing point because it's not written there. You'd have to look up, and that's just the way it happened. This is a simple timeline. It's similar to the one you got. I hand wrote in some more things that were going on under those columns. You can take the time, hopefully at home, to look those up. It'll give you a greater understanding. But basically, there's the Old Testament, the church age, and the 7 years and the millennium. It's just a real simple, these are the time slots and the basic things that happened. And I'm just moving on because of the time. So we need to touch on the judgment. Now, there's a sheep and goat judgment in Matthew 25. And the reason, I'll show you why I need to touch on that. So it's also called the judgment of the nations. And Jesus sends the angels out. When Armageddon war is over and everything's in a mess, it's a crazy mess, then he sends all the angels out, and he has to have a judgment right then and there, because the millennium is going to start in some days. Daniel lets us know that it's actually 75 days later the millennium starts, but people have to be judged before they go into that, and they have to separate who's saved and who isn't, who believes and who isn't. So the sheep will go into the millennium as flesh and blood people, and the goats will be taken away into the lake of fire. And so this is called the sheep and goat judgment, or it's also called the judgment of the nations. And this goat just caught wind that there's going to be a sheep and goat judgment. Anyway, so it's neat that that Jesus, Matthew is a separate study on its own, and I'm not going to get into some things I'd like to, but here's what I wanted you to see. That if there was, let's just say, a post-tribulation rapture, so the church goes through all this mess with the unsaved, and then they believe that they get raptured at the end, and then they come right back down. Well, to get into heaven, flesh and blood doesn't enter the kingdom of God, so everyone would have a glorified body, right? When they get raptured at the end, glorified body, then they'd come down. So who's going to go into the millennial reign? Because the glorified people are going to help Jesus rule. Who's going to repopulate the millennium if the church went up and came down and now they have glorified bodies? That's what's going to happen to us. We will all have glorified bodies with the rapture. And then it says we will help Jesus rule and reign. He'll have lots of jobs for us, I'm sure. But the people who survive that 70th week are the ones who are going to, if they're believers, if they got saved during that time, then they're the ones that go into the millennium as flesh and blood people so that they can repopulate the world, okay? But everyone else is in a glorified body. We're like, kind of like the angels are in glorified bodies, you know. So that is impossible to have that viewpoint right there, the post-trib rapture view. And so I just wanted to make that point. I'm telling you about the rapture, or about the judgment, excuse me, at the end of that 7 years, so that you can see that there can't be a post-rapture post-tribulation rapture. Get those words all mixed up. It's not possible, because it has to be flesh and blood people who survive that go into the millennial reign. But Jesus has this sheep and goat judgment so that he can sort them out. And that's what all those parables are about in Matthew. It's sorting them out. Sorting them out. The wheat and tares, the fish, the everything, every single parable is sorting the saved and the unsaved out, because what's coming up? That millennium time. Okay, I'm going to finish with this. And let's see, it's let's see. If the believers are raptured at the end of the 70th week, they'll get their spiritual bodies. Okay, I just told you about that part. Okay, so okay, I went ahead and finished that. So in Revelations 3, verse 10, it says that God spares us from the wrath that's going to come upon the whole world. Okay? It comes right out and says that. And I suppose there'd be some people who maybe could say, oh, well, he's talking about going to hell or not going to hell. No, there's a thing that's going to come upon the whole world, and it's there's a purpose for the Jews and there's a purpose for the Gentiles. And people will get saved during that time. After the church disappears, it's going to be very shocking to millions, and it will change everything. And so it will just, we are the restraining force. We are the ones that try to fight for good laws and righteous things and upright standing. And once all that's removed, then the evil will just come on with an onslaught, and the world will quickly fall. It'll quickly fall. But there will be people then that have been witnessed to, like from you, and told, oh yeah, they were right after all. They did get raptured. And they'll realize, and so they'll become believers. So the harvest will be huge during that time. Now, it won't be a good time for them. There'll be a lot of martyrs, and it will be very difficult for believers. But there will be survivors, because those are the ones that will go into the Messianic reign and will repopulate the world. And Jesus is going to rule from Jerusalem. So there's a lot of books and of the Bible that talk about that, and it's going to be a very, very good time. Anyway, how do I land this plane? So I just thank you for your time today, and I appreciate you being such good listeners. And I know it was a lot of information to say in a short amount of time, but I just wanted to let you know that it's not because we're cowards or want an escape theory, but if you saw how Matthew develops, if you saw how Zechariah and so many of these develop, it's really clear if you put all these things together. But the missing link is Daniel, the last 4 verses of chapter 9, and that's the ultimate proof that we are not part of that 70th week. We are part of the church age. So I would like to coin a new phrase, church age rapture. Woo-hoo. Thank you.